Okay, Nick and Andy, let's talk about the reports that Erik ten Hag is set to stay at Manchester United. Several reports from the PA, Athletic, Guardian in the UK say that ten Hag is going to stay. There's been a review internally. There's been a lot going on behind the scenes at Man United as the new owners, Ineos, really dig their teeth into the situation there at Old Trafford. Nick, I'm going to come to you right away because I think we all pretty much thought, even after the FA Cup win for Man United, that was that for Erik ten Hag. But it looks like he's going to stay. So is that a good decision from Manchester United? A very easy question to start with.
Look, I'm going to say 50-50. And it's because this is a new regime, and judging it on the outside, if it's not Manchester United, and it is, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, but if it's not Manchester United, you say to yourself, I like the idea of quote unquote outsiders who are insiders, who are passionate followers of the game, who are data driven, reviewing, saying these guys that we want to talk to might be an upgrade from Erik ten Hag, but if they don't want the job, we think this guy's good enough. And it's a bit of a blow to ten Hag's ego, which I think he probably needed, even with the season it is. So I just want to say, I don't... If Manchester United ends up continuing to be the Manchester United we've seen for the last 10 years, then of course, no, it's not a good decision. But coming from the outside, I respect the process and the possibility. And I think if it works, maybe it changes a little bit of how we viewed the fast fire manager thing, which I think, and Andy said this a few times, in the Premier League, we've seen it a little bit less this year. We've seen a little bit more sticking with guys when it gets sticky. So I think it's 50-50, but I like the idea of it working, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what made sense was something you said there, that these are very data-driven, very clever people that work in business, other sports, that have taken their time here. This is not a knee-jerk reaction. They've been watching on for months now after the season, reviewing absolutely everything. And Andy, they seem to have come to the conclusion that Erik ten Hag, A, may have been a bit unlucky with the injuries, and B, he is extremely good at producing young talent and nurturing that. And we've seen that with so many young players coming through at United. And maybe this is a season a bit too early for them for the rigors of the Premier League week in, week out, but trending in the right direction, potentially, a lot of those players. But the reports say he's going to get a contract extension for another 2 years. So that's another 3 years of ten Hag if he sees that out. What is expected from him in that time period, Andy? I mean, what is that next step? Because he already achieved it in his first season, Champions League, and won a trophy, but then they took an almighty step back last season. So it's kind of hard to draw the lines and get the check boxes out of what he needs to do in the next few years, right, to get United to where they want to get to.
Yeah, it's a maze. It's not a line, Joe. It's a maze that weaves, all across the world. Yeah, I will accept that Erik ten Hag can do the job at Manchester United, that he's good enough to do the job at Manchester United. He's probably the best manager out there right now that was available to them that would take the job at the moment. And I think that's why he's still in the job. I don't think anybody else wanted it. There were the reports before the FA Cup final that they have essentially made their decision. We need to understand kind of the relationship between clubs and people that run them these days and the media, and how they use leaks and reports to kind of test things out in the public. And I think the response to that maybe made them reconsider, plus winning the FA Cup final and being able to say, well, do we have to make a change? And so it already kind of looks like to me that there is a bit of wishy-washiness. There's a little bit of going back and forth from these new owners. And maybe you can say, well, that's good. You need to be flexible. You need to be open to more than just one idea. But I still don't understand the direction that the club is going in after the last month or so of the reports and now the new reports. And if ten Hag is still going to be there, I don't think you need to give him a contract extension. It's a tough situation for a manager to be in the final year of a contract. I take that on board. But you're also probably... Does anybody think Erik ten Hag makes it to the end of this 3-year contract if he gets the 2-year extension? Just yes or no?
No.
5%, yes.
Then you just cost yourself millions of dollars more having to pay compensation to fire him at some point during that contract. And so it's just, you're saying one thing out of one side of your mouth, and then you're kind of doing something else out of the other side. And the two are just, everything Manchester United does is at odds with everything else that Manchester United does.
All right. So, in terms of Erik ten Hag, Nick, I mean, he won 2 trophies: League Cup, FA Cup. Finished 3rd in the Premier League in his debut season, and 8th last season, which was obviously a disaster for them. But do we just see this past season as an anomaly? Then is that how Ineos are seeing it? Because I mentioned before the young players coming through: Garnacho, Maino, obviously Hoyland. These players are thriving. They are improving. He has a record of doing this at Ajax and other clubs he's worked at. So are they almost just gambling a little bit, United, and saying, you know what, that was as bad as it possibly could have got. Some of those performances at the end of the season was bad and the bottom was hit, and it's not going to be as bad. And we're going to have key defensive players added this summer. We're going to have less injuries next season. Do you think that's what they've done here when they've dug through the data and kind of gone through it with a fine-tooth comb?
I think that's part of it. I'll say this with some degree of confidence. Given that team and their resources, it probably can't get worse unless they're going to do a free fall down the pyramid. Given what they spend, because last season was a combination of comedic and tragic errors. You start with the Sancho falling out and Erik ten Hag making that line in the sand. I'm not saying Sancho would have refound his footing, immediately and been in the comfort that he was in Dortmund, but the alternative there was a guy they paid way too much money for in Antony and had a horrific off-field. That's the tragedy that I mentioned. Like the things that happened with him were alarming, especially in the wake of what they went through with Greenwood as well. So at right wing, you've got a vacuum. Rashford falls off the map. Martial, who's not great, but let's be honest, would have played real minutes and probably pitched in a goal or two, is missing forever. Thank God Manu stepped up, right? Becomes an England player. And then the back line, total mess in terms of injuries, except Alo. Lisandro Martinez misses. Varane misses. Lindelof is out for some time. Maguire's off. Evans was on trial in August, guys. On trial to stay in shape to find another club. And they're like, hey, you're fine, I guess. Want to stay? Yeah. So I don't know how it get much
Luke Shaw as well being out. So.
Yeah, Luke Shaw's a great. Yeah, could it really have gotten worse than that? It's hard to say. They got lucky in a lot of games, so they could have been worse on the table, but the performances could not have been much worse.
I mean, Andy, it's good that United have some stability, it looks like, and I think so with Erik ten Hag, and Nick talked about it earlier in terms of the general trend across the Premier League that clubs are going to give managers a bit more time and rather than being fire happy. But you mentioned it as well, that I think there was a lack of confidence in other managers to come into this situation and change it around quite quickly. And they've seen...
We saw it at Chelsea as well.
Yeah, exactly. So we've seen the kind of pressure that Ten Hag's been under for a long, long time now. And other managers are like, I don't want to deal with that. I'm good where I am right now. I'm busy. I'm better off waiting until they get further down the line. But I mean, are we going to have a situation where 3 months into this upcoming season, United are struggling again and he's under immense pressure? The summer signings haven't worked out. I mean, it's hard to tell now, but I guess what is a successful kind of start and next season for United? Because to me, have to finish in the Champions League, have to be challenging for trophies, have to win the Europa League, and there has to be, just off the field, a successful summer in terms of recruitment, because I don't think they've had that for a couple of seasons now.
It's June 13th as we're recording this. We'll be having the same conversation again October or November 13th. Somewhere in, I'll give you a 1 month window where we're going to land and we're going to be back to this. Should Manchester United have retained and re-signed Erik ten Hag to a new contract? This is just kind of what the new reality for Manchester United is, unless they go out and have an absolutely incredible transfer window and bring in players at 3 or 4 starting positions that are not just upgrades, that are not just fixes, but are long-term stars and contributors to this team. Because I think you can look up and down the starting squad, and there's 2, 3, maybe 4 players that you say, okay, he has to be in the starting 11 next season. We can build around him. To be a club that wants to compete for Premier League titles, that wants to be in the top 4, that wants to maybe even compete for Europa League to win it next season, that can't be the case. And so they're going to have to be incredible in the transfer window, which, to your point, Joe, it's been a long time Aside from, one signing, maybe 2 signings in a summer, they need to hit an absolute grand slam this summer. And I just don't have the confidence with the recent track history and new people coming into the club and just getting situated and it being their first window, their first months in the job.
It's saying all the right things, though, these new people coming in terms of a clear philosophy of the kind of player they want to go after. But now the proof is going to be in the pudding, right, this summer, because we've seen so many big names come in over the last few summers. Hasn't worked out. But if Erik ten Hag, if you really believe in him and his methods, we know that he is a more possession-based coach. We know that some of the people coming in on the football side at United prefer that style and want to develop young players in that style. So we really have to see an identity, I think, now. That is the next step for Erik ten Hag and United, and we didn't see that last season. Didn't see it in his first season either, really, but they got away with it and had some good results. So I think that's the next step. But obviously, we'll keep you updated on Pro Soccer Talk on NBCSports.com and all the latest around Erik ten Hag, his future at Manchester United, and what they have planned under the Dutchman for this summer and beyond.
Hi there, I'm Rebecca Lowe, studio host for NBC's coverage of the Premier League. Don't forget to hit subscribe to watch more videos all season long. And for even more Premier League content, from original series to live matches, head over to Peacock. And be sure to tune in for Premier League mornings every weekend on USA Network and on Peacock. We will see you there.